anxious? I bet you're feeling kind of mad at yourself. It's because it's starting to shift. And guess what causes that in us? Stress. It's the biggest issue. And if we start to figure out how to manage our own stress, it does help balance those out too. Did I hit this? I'll let you.
All right.
What is this that we're talking about?
Yes.
Stigma.
Talking about stigma, right? So I like these. I'm a visual learner, so I like these little cartoons and things. They got this woman kind of looks like peeking out the door, and written on the door are a lot of like stigmatizing words, right? So basket case, insane, schizo, violent, drain on society, right? And sometimes we don't realize the power of language, right? Maybe we think we're amongst friends or amongst a group of buddies or whoever, and we start throwing around some of these words harmlessly. We have no bad intentions of that, but maybe somebody in that group is struggling themselves with a mental health condition, or maybe their loved one has a mental health condition, or maybe mom and dad did. Who knows, right? But those words start to bring up that stigma. So when we talk about what is stigma, it's this process of stereotyping, of having some prejudice against, or a power imbalance to kind of oppress people, right? That's more of like the textbooky definition. So what is stigma? Do you want me to do this? Okay. So again, one of our more formal definitions is viewing someone in a negative way due to their medical condition. All right? We make the person the problem rather than identifying their condition. So often, and maybe it's because of the profession I'm in, but so often I'll have people come up to me and introduce themselves, like, hi, I'm Mr. or Miss So-and-so, and I'm schizophrenic, or I'm bipolar, or whatever. Just the way that they introduce themselves is stigmatizing, right? And it tells me a lot about them, that they've identified so strongly with that diagnosis, with that label, that it's like all of them. And so part of what we start teaching is even a shift in language. Hi, I'm Miss Smith, and I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I'm a person with this disorder, right? It's not all of you, it might be a piece of you.
Doctor, I have a question on that then. Okay, so why does a person do that? Why would they come up to you and tell you that for? What's the...
Because that has become their full identity, right? So they've invested so much time and energy, maybe, into that sick role, into being in that patient role sometimes. Sometimes, unfortunately, it happens without them even knowing it. Pretty soon, maybe they're coming into the hospital 5 days a week for some kind of treatment or a group, and they think that that's all they can do.
Yeah, but the people that I worry about is the people that comes up to you and say, I'm perfectly normal.
None of us are, right?
Yeah, right, that's what I mean. I'm normal. I got nowhere.
And this is what we work so hard sometimes.
Yeah.
To kind of shift the change in people is to say, it's kind of moving sometimes out of the sick role into a well role, right? Moving in more to that wellness role.
Yeah, and just adding that word normal. When I was in school, our professor gave us like 20 minutes to find it. We couldn't do it. Normal is what people perceive normal. But really, we're on a spectrum of many different cultures, people, perspective, but yet, we do categorize, you're normal, you're abnormal. It's not 100% true and unfair. So I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that's something that we teach in class too. Normal is just a word.
Yeah, I know.
What is normal? What is normal?
Yeah, great movie, another great movie.
So we talk again a little bit more about stigma. What is stigma, right? It's these attitudes and beliefs that cause us to maybe reject or avoid or be fearful of someone else because they're different than us, right? Just because they're different. Negative and erroneous attitudes, right? So there's a lot of errors in the thinking, and a lot of that's been perpetuated by the media. So I'll tell you, I pick and choose my battles, but when I'm out and about and I hear certain statistics thrown around or certain labels thrown around, I'm not always, it depends on the person, but I'm trying to be that voice, that gentle voice that's like, well, actually that may not be true, right? It might be a little annoying, but this is what I'm working at, right? To try to break down some of that stigma.
And a quick stat with that, guys, just looking back at your own grade school, when you guys were in grade school, did they teach you at all anything about mental health? How about high school? You're a well-rounded individual. When you go to high school, wouldn't they teach an individual? It was amazing. This is something that blew my mind. And actually a social work student came back and called me later on when this actually happened. But the state of Illinois in 2019 finally stated that they're going to start teaching our kids in grade school and high school mental health. I'll repeat the year, 2019. And when we say people don't have information, it's because we stick it in the corner and we don't talk about it. That's why it's great for us to be here today, because this is breaking stigma by just talking. So I did want to share that.
It's like when we're in grade school, they teach us the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but nobody teaches us those life skills for how to manage life, right? And some of the things that life throws at us.
Question or comment? Same thing with the military. You know, they train us how to do a lot of things, but they don't teach us about what we're going to come back with, or what this all we will experience from all these different things that we see and do and experience. So there's very little training as to most of this. This is stuff that sneaks up on
I
us.
think that-
We've got no education on it, and most of the education we talk are perceptions or things we've heard from other people or things we've grown up with. So that's the real hard thing a lot of times, especially within our families and culturally. We grow up very, sometimes specific stigmas within our family or our culture saying this is what a person who's mentally ill is or isn't. And, you know, that those kind of things make it very difficult when we come back from the things that we've experienced in the military.
Yeah. It can be hard to go ask for help, right? If you're being told that that's a sign of weakness, or you just kind of suck it up and move on.
I have a question, Dr. Lyskawa.
Yeah.
What Bert was saying. Let's say you have someone who is got a diagnosis of mental illness, and they're coming to terms with it. They're working towards recovery, and then they go to their family and they go, "Hey, I'm getting better." And they're standing up with a sense of owning it instead of hiding it,
Yeah.
and saying, "I've been diagnosed with this, I'm working toward my recovery." And then the family is like very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
which I think is more often than not is someone, and I kind of got a couple of folks we work with in the back of my head where a lot of their struggle isn't in the PRC, it's in their home.
Yep. Yeah. Wendy is so right. Sometimes we can educate all we want, right? The individual who's struggling, but if they're going home to a family that's telling them, "Stop going there. Why are you going? You know, that's no good. You just need to say a prayer," or whatever, right? That's hard. And so as much as we can, we try to involve the family or the loved one or the friend or whoever we can to provide them some education too, right?
That's just a very difficult, stigmatizing thing
It is.
for someone in treatment to come to terms with,
So true.
and for them to handle
Yep.
in a personal level.
Because Wendy, it's key, like when we see veterans where their family's involved, open, and wanting to work with the veteran, those cases, those situations work so much better. I even remember one father, I'll never forget it, because the vet did what we call a vet choice. He shared his recovery story with his peers, and he said it was just, his dad would come in and he would sleep almost like 22 hours, 21 hours a day. And all his dad did was, didn't say anything to him, just lifted the shade. And the vet said, that showed me he understood, knowing I'm not in bed for no reason. He's showing me at least a path, there's outdoor. And for him, he said that was the first step to get him out of that bed. His dad never yelled at him, never said you're lazy, never said get out of bed. He opened the shade. And that was, to me, it even tingles right now as I talk about it, because I know this veteran and how far he has come and how powerful his dad being in his his life and his mom, who were 100% supporting him. And when you had that, same thing that we're going to talk about combating stigma, when someone with a mental illness does not feel alone, that they can share this, recovery is possible. It's actually on the fast track now. It's doing much better.
One of the best parts about having a group of individuals is that they know that they're not alone, right? There's a place where other people with similar issues are kind of struggling. Stigma, one of the top reasons that prevents people from coming in our doors, right? People who might need treatment. I know you guys had to talk about suicide before. The research shows us veterans who aren't in treatment, who are struggling, are more likely to commit suicide than the veterans who are in treatment, right? We know that. It's how do we get people in? We got to start talking about the stigma behind getting mental health treatment. Okay, so these cartoons, I'm going to read them to you. They might be a little bit light, but I like these. We think about this, and I've heard this before. Sometimes people will say, well, I can't go talk to a civilian. They can't possibly know what I've been through. They can't, right? They can't. But if you've been diagnosed with cancer, does your doctor have to also have a diagnosis of cancer to work with you? Start thinking about some of these comparisons. So these cartoons are kind of poking fun at it. What if we actually started to treat mental health equal with our physical health? And so you've got this person here, this what if, says, dude, you just think you need your insulin medication, right? Because you can't deal with reality, right? You just think you need that. No, you need that insulin. Or, oh man, I had to put in overtime just because Joe and Lynn had a heart attack or something. Right? We don't say things like that. That would be horrible. We say that when it comes to mental health. Okay? I'm getting very tired of this cancer of yours, right? We don't say that to people. What? You mean there's some guy with cystic fibrosis just walking around? Can't we lock these people up? And I think it's high time that you snapped out of it. A lot of these things are things that some of our folks that we work with have heard before, right? And sometimes family and friends mean really well. They're trying to be motivated, they're trying to be supportive, and we say things like that. We don't realize the impact of some of that. If it was easy enough to just snap out of it, I wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't be standing here, right? Okay, so this talks a little bit about when you break a bone, right? You get a cast, and you're like, hey, sign my cast. Everybody sign it, especially when you're younger, right? You get a bad cut. Check out my stitches, man. I got like 12 of them, okay? You get the flu. You see this on social media. I just threw up all over everything I own. I need an old priest and a young priest, right? And then when you're struggling with mental health issues, you see this guy, hey, nobody's bragging about it. Nobody's putting it out there. It's just, we're not talking about it.
And not only that, Dr. Lyskawa, nobody knows how to respond to it.
Right? What do I say when my friend comes to me and tells me that they're struggling with something? Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes it's just listening, right? To just be there for them. Helpful advice, another cartoon, right? So the top one, you've got somebody lying there, look pretty sick. Friend comes up, says, I get that you have food poisoning and all, but are you even trying to make an effort? Right? The person's dying, right? You see this other person who's got missing their hand and bleeding there, right, from the wrist. And says, you just need to change your frame of mind, then you'll feel better. Doesn't work like that. Again, these are all things that maybe we've been guilty of saying, or some of our folks have heard this said. You got somebody with the flu here. Friend standing over and saying, hey, have you tried not having the flu?
And guys, when we look at this, one of the biggest things is a mental illness is sometimes what they call invisible. Even though there are signs, and people will even talk about wearing a mask. I could pretend to be happy, I could pretend to be connected, but underneath, I'm extremely hurting. These things don't happen because I know, number one, you'd be extremely rude, and it's just not what we do as social creatures. But with mental health, when you don't see it, people do minimize it. And that's the biggest piece that we really want to keep educating on this, because I know veterans have told me with tears, this is hard to deal with, Joe. I deal with it every day. My dad is on me, my neighbor is on me, my boss is on me, and it builds. If you picture, it's the psychological baggage, you could say, where it just keeps weighing you down to the point where it gets really difficult.
Sometimes there's a big stigma associated with taking medications for our mental health, right? But you've got the cartoon character here of this guy who's, putting an insulin injection in his leg, and his friend's kind of saying, like, I don't think it's healthy that you have to take medication every day to kind of feel normal, right? We wouldn't say that to somebody who needs life-saving medication of insulin. We talked about that chemical imbalance in the brain. That's what the medications are helping to do. They're helping to balance those different serotonin, all those different neurotransmitters in the brain. You've got somebody bleeding from their stomach here. Their friend comes up saying, it's like you're not even trying, A lot of times we hear that for our folks with depression, they're just being lazy, they sleep all day. And this last one, we've got somebody kind of there, it looks like they're at the hospital, maybe connected to an IV, and it says, well, lying there in bed obviously isn't helping you. Have you tried anything else? Okay, here's another one. I'm not going to go through all the stats on this, but it says, what's the public reading about mental illness? We touched on this earlier. Over half of these stories, when they talk about mental illness, are talking about the dangerousness of mental illness and the blame. Over half. And there's been lots of different studies where they'll take a segment of newspaper, stories from this time frame to this time frame, and they'll look back through it. Almost all of them are stigmatizing about mental health. Okay.
All right, we're going to do a couple more stats here, guys. All right, as many as 75% of people with mental illness experience negative stigma. So think about that. 3 out of 4 who maybe come in the door are dealing with the things that we're talking about, in addition to the mental health diagnosis. 40% of those surveyed agree that a person with a mental illness should not hold a public office. So the person with the mental illness is saying, oh no, I don't think that's a good idea. 50% believe that major depression was caused by the way a person was raised or by God's will. And this goes, once again, to a lack of education and knowing, because would we ever say that to someone with cancer? Would we ever say that to someone with diabetes? 60% believe that pulling oneself together was effective treatment. That's a large percentage. And think about someone who is trying to pull themselves together each day and not doing it, struggling. 56% reported they face discrimination within the family. Wendy brought it up earlier. When you feel that your home and your family is supposed to be a safe spot, it could be just the opposite. 51% reported discrimination among friends, and then 47% reported discrimination in workplace. Are you guys starting to feel that weight?
No wonder people aren't talking about it, right? I don't want to deal with this.
I go to work, I go to my home.
I think veterans carry the weight all the time. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is like, people are only, but you were taught to not show weakness. You were taught not to show any type of fear or say anything negative, to walk it off, to be strong at all times. Put it away, and not deal with it. I think there's many things like this, especially these things that even amongst ourselves we don't talk about. Or if we do, it's in hush, whispered to the side. And I know veterans who are Vietnam, World War II, Korea, who've never gone in to get help. And they've carried these things their whole life, or they've gone through multiple marriages and all these different traumas in their lives, and it just continues to repeat itself. And a lot of times it's not just them, like I said, it's their surroundings and their support systems that I think is maybe even easier to be a necessarily crazy veteran than it is to be a veteran dealing with mental illness. You know, where you've actually come out. And I kind of see it that way, like coming out.
Yeah.
And to own it. I mean, think about this and say, hey, get in front of all the guys and say, oh yeah, I have a mental illness.
Especially in the military, that perceived as.
Yeah, I get shit for it all the time.
Yeah,
You know, like, yeah, you know, and the guy, oh yeah. And then I'll just get outside. Struggle with that. Like, why don't you say it louder? You know, it's that kind of thing. How can you not? You know, I mean, that's the thing is, to me, it's abnormal that you don't carry something with all these things, you know? And the thing is, yeah, if you don't treat a wound, or if you don't do the right thing, it's not going to heal. You know, and the thing is I think it's especially different. And that's why I think the suicide rate is so high and increasing, because there's really not an easy way with veterans to really discuss this now. And I think we have to have the courage to really stand up and own it. Okay? If not for ourselves and the others, because there's too many dying. You know, and older veterans who struggle with civil rights need to step up. I always say, well, can I do talk to you guys? Well, admit what you've gone through. Share it. Show them a way. Show them what not to do. So these things to me are very powerful with this population. You know, most of these guys will take this stuff to the grave rather than talk about it.
You know, one of the oldest veterans that I know that I've worked with in our program was 93 years old. World War II vet. I mean, he was incredible, right? It's never too late to come in. It's never too late. And I hear so often from some of the older folks that I work with, like, man, where were you when I was in my 20s? Why didn't I know about this? You know? Why wasn't this available? I feel like I've wasted X amount of years. That's too bad, right?
You know, and I think that goes along with, you know, veterans don't usually talk about what they did when they were in the service. And we did a 100th birthday for a World War II veteran. And his daughters and his sons were texting different ones of us for days later. He's never talked this much about when he was in. Right, guys? You know, so sometimes it can just be something as simple as people not forget your birthday.
Yeah.
You know, literally, I mean, the family just kept emailing us and texting us how thrilled he was that we were there, and he opened up so much more about his experiences during World War II.
That's
And a
awesome.
lot of them were pleasant, you know, but with the unpleasant thoughts come the pleasant ones too.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what the family was really appreciated, was that they got to know their dad a little more, because we all showed up to celebrate his birthday. So you never know how you're gonna stimulate somebody to think, well, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that goes to the biggest piece, just supporting being there.
Right.
And it may
That's
open
it.
the door, it may open the window, but that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then the last, guys, is the biggest one, I think. 44% of reported discrimination from your general practitioner, so from your doctors, from your clinicians. I was really surprised. That's a heavy number, 44%.
So what does that mean? Discrimination from general practitioners. So you're saying a doctor is saying
They have some stigmatizing beliefs, right? So this is a true story. So this happened to me when I was going on interviews for my internship, right? So I'm going to different VA hospitals and I'm interviewing. They're taking us on tours around the campus. And this was down in Biloxi, Mississippi. The girl is taking us around, and I say girl because she was a trainee, she wasn't yet a full psychologist. And we're walking by a building and she kind of starts to whisper, "This is where they treat the people with schizophrenia." And I was like, why are we whispering? Well, you know, like, what is this? I was going to call her out on it. Like, what? I don't understand.
There's some reason we should whisper.
Yeah, like, you know, I couldn't believe it though. And that still stands out to me. I'm thinking, gosh, I'm going into this field, so is this young lady. What the heck are we doing? How can we still have this within our own profession sometimes? It happens. It's unfortunate, right? So we're always talking to providers about it. This is why I love having veterans on our team, right? Just the presence of folks being in that room, I think breaks down the stigma.
What you just said reminds me of how often I've heard you say that a lot of clinicians don't focus on recovery.
That's what makes our program, I think, a little bit unique, right? Because the old medical model is like, what's wrong with you? We just need to fix you. But when you think about that, when you go in to see your doctor, that's like usually the first thing they might ask you. What brings you in today? Kind of like, what's wrong with you?
What's the problem?
Yeah. But one of the first things we ask our folks too is like, what's going right with you? What are your strengths? How do we build on that to help get you to where you want to be? And a lot of times we get that like deer in the headlights kind of look, like, what do you mean, what are my strengths? I can rattle off my negative qualities for like an hour, but I don't think about our strengths.
That's a good thought. That's a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
That's why she's a doctor.
Yeah, well,